Well, hello there, and welcome back to the first of two instalments of Fabulous Folklore Presents in August. This time I'm talking to S.A. Lawless, a herbalist, gardener, forager, mycophile, outdoor educator, and published author and illustrator, with a long-held fascination with folklore and witchcraft, currently living in rural Ontario, Canada. She has been studying and practicing herbalism for 20 years and has worked as a professional nature field guide for 15 years. As a herbalist, her focus is on low-dose botanicals, specialising in researching, growing, processing, working with and writing about poisonous plants with a special interest in medicinal nightshades. In this chat we talk about poisonous plants, including how to grow them, why poisonous plants are actually important to ecosystems, the natural equals safe false assumption, and which plants you might be surprised to learn are poisonous. Enjoy! Hello there and welcome to Fabulous Folklore, the podcast for all things folklore, occult and just a bit weird. I'm your host Icy Sedgwick, blogger, fantasy author and your guide into these rather mysterious realms. I've got some rare things to show you, so come on in, take a look around, but be careful not to touch anything. These things sometimes bite. Hello and welcome to Fabulous Folklore. How are you doing?
I'm doing really well. How are you doing, Icy?
I'm not too bad. We've known each other online for quite a long time, haven't we?
We've been following each other forever. It's nice to finally talk to you.
Yeah. Some people might know you better as Bane Folk. You've been selling plant products for a while, but you've recently rebranded to the Poison Garden.
Yes.
So, what was it that kind of led to that sort of change of name more than anything else?
I wanted to focus more on gardening and growing and plant folklore and plant lore. And I felt like the name was way more, well, like it's more of accepted. And everyone knows poison gardens these days, especially because of the famous Alnwick Poison Garden and the Blarney Castle Poison Garden. So I figured it was more recognizable, whereas Bane folk, a lot of people don't know what that phrase or the word Bane quite means. So even though it was a fun name, it's I really like the Poison Garden. I feel like it more gives off gardening and apothecary vibes. And always have a poison garden, so it matches me and my business perfectly. Yeah.
Why do you think there's been such an interest in poisonous plants in recent years? Is it because of the likes of the gardener Anik, or are people just interested in weird stuff?
I think people have always been interested in weird stuff. There's always been websites on poisonous plants. I think it's kind of like crime podcasts and crime procedural TV shows. We all want the dark, unsavory, unknown. It's more appealing and fascinating, I think. I think it's pretty much that's it. That's where it is. The interest, where it's the same as crimes and murders and serial killers. We want to know about the poisonous plants.
I like that. The poisonous plants are like the true crime of the botanical world.
A little bit.
I do find actually that my episodes about plants are usually quite popular, but anytime I cover poisonous plants and trees, they're the most popular ones. Also weeds as well, but that's a side issue. Does the folklore about these plants actually include anything helpful for people, or are they just cautionary tales to get people to leave them alone?
I think it's a mix. There's definitely folklore that gives away, like, hey, this is really deadly. Don't touch it. Don't eat it. But there's also folklore about how to use these plants either medicinally or to interact with nature or the spirit world or fairy. And those I think are more useful to little tidbits for people if they dig into the folklore. It depends on whether you just want it for knowledge or if you're a spiritual practitioner and you want to interact with plants on a deeper level, I think.
Yeah, because obviously there is a whole strand of kind of occult practice around poisonous plants, isn't there?
Yeah, and it goes back thousands of years, like to ancient Greece and beyond. People have been using poisonous plants in magic and ritual for thousands of years for different reasons, usually protection, purification, initiation, that kind of thing.
Hmm. So what would be the kind of plants people would have heard of that people would sort of most commonly use magically, do you think?
Today or like 2000 years ago?
I suppose what people today will be familiar with, but that people had been using magically maybe back in the day.
Okay. Well, I think most people are familiar with nightshades. Like when you think of poisonous plants, a lot of people immediately think of nightshades. And the fear of them goes back a really long ways, especially in Europe, because a lot of the nightshades were poisonous, whereas in South America, a lot of them are edible. So I think that that stays in the consciousness of nightshades. So like belladonna, mandrake, henbane, those are some of the big name ones that have a lot of folklore surrounding them, and a lot of people can recognize either by name or on sight. Although I do meet a lot of people who think that they're not real, like they think they're from fiction, especially mandrake. So occasionally I meet people that, oh, it's real? They just know it from fiction books.
Mm.
So a lot of the mythical plants have turned out to actually be real plants, which is fascinating to me. So nightshades definitely poisonous mushrooms for sure,
Mm.
especially Amanita muscaria or fly agaric relatives. A lot of people know that. Destroying angels, the white Amanita mushrooms that are across the continents, those are super poisonous. So I think a lot of people know those ones probably the most. And then there's millions more that people would never guess are poisonous or have equally amazing folklore just because they're not as well known.
Mm. Why do you think it is that they aren't as well known? Is it because something like, the fly agaric is really recognizable? Like you can't mistake that for anything else, whereas one white mushroom might look like another white mushroom. Is it the same thing with plants that sometimes they're just really unassuming?
I've been a herbalist and nature field guide for about 20 years. And the thing I've noticed the most is it's popular culture. People recognize most what is coming from popular culture, from visual images, from TV, from movies, from reading books. So whatever's in the popular culture and is repeated the most. And of course, what is most well known is what's going to be repeated the most.
Yes.
It's like an author who isn't familiar with poisonous plants is going to reference the most common poisonous plants in pop culture in their work
Hmm.
because that's what they know, and that's what's information is most easily accessible. So for me, it's just what is most easily accessible is what is known
Hmm.
in general for all herbs and trees and mushrooms.
Do they go in trends? Like I'm thinking when you look at what mentioned true crime before,
Oh yeah.
you think about something like strychnine, and for a little while that was like the poison of choice. But I would not recognize the tree it comes from if it was in front of me because why would I? So is it that kind of thing? Like it depends what's fashionable as to which ones, which is why I guess something like Mandrake made a comeback because of a particular film franchise that I think neither of us want to name.
I see mandrake, belladonna, and wolfsbane, aka monkshood, aka aconite. Those three I see in film and movie and TV probably the most repeated, even if they're not accurately represented. I see them included in movies, TV. So definitely there's trends. So when wolfsbane I've seen mentioned a lot in fiction lately, in like fantasy fiction, in the stories as well as in the titles of the books. So yeah, there's definitely trends that you can look out for. Even just by searching a website like Etsy or something, that's how sometimes I see what's trending is you type in the herbs and see how many products
Hmm.
involve that herb. Whereas 15 years ago, there might have been zero. Today, there might be 3,000. So that's one of the ways I keep track is by seeing what's trending, what people are making for sale as well.
What's the biggest misconception that you've seen then with these plants, and you're like, that is just 100% wrong, or even like 75% wrong? What is the big thing that people keep getting wrong about like those three plants?
The thing that people get wrong about wolfsbane is that it's hallucinogenic and it's not.
Oh,
It's
okay.
straight up poisonous. It's just poisonous. In medicine, it's mostly used to treat pain, especially arthritis pain and pain from the cold. So like if you're in like northern Russia and in the winter your joints are frozen solid, they would use aconite root ointment on their knees and elbows and wrists and stuff. Um, for belladonna, I think most people don't know how medicinal it is. They just think it's deadly nightshade, deadly poisonous. They don't realize the crazy long list of medicines that it's in and what it's used for in conventional medicine. Most people don't realize that. And then what was the other one? Mandrake. Mandrake, again, most people don't think it's real. And if they know it's real, they don't realize that it's medicinal as well.
Hmm.
And I've also met people who think that only the root is poisonous, but people have died from eating the leaves,
Hmm.
mistaking it for a salad green fairly recently. It's very deadly. The only part that isn't deadly is the fruit, but the seeds are also deadly. So you can't eat the fruit without either removing the seeds or not chewing the seeds. So yeah, there's just people don't look at the whole plant. Usually they just look at one aspect of the plant, and it's usually, again, coming from popular culture. And that's the part they remember. They don't usually look for more info, mostly because they don't know where to look for more info. So I'm hoping to be that bridge. Come to me, I'll give you the info.
I think I was just thinking there how many times I've seen something like aconite be used as a murder weapon.
A lot,
Yeah.
in especially TV, especially crime procedurals. I think CSI did it. I'm pretty sure The Mentalist definitely, I believe, used that one. They use belladonna too. There's probably a whole bunch in British crime procedurals of aconite poisoning
Mm.
for sure.
I know there was one of them. I want to say it might have been belladonna actually turned up in, was it eye drops? And it was actually used to counteract another poison, and that was in Silent Witness. But given that's about forensic scientists, I would kind of hope that they would get that right.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, because it is an antidote for a bunch of poisons. Yeah, atropine specifically.
Mm.
Yeah, that's kind of cool. I love it when they get it right.
I find it wild though that you can be poisoned with one thing and then be given another poison as the antidote. Always seems really counterintuitive, but it's just really cool how that happens.
It's really cool. A lot of antidotes for poisons are poisons. So, like belladonna is used as an antidote for chemical poisoning in warfare.
Hmm.
It counteracts paralysis, which is really cool. It's been used since World War II, I believe. It's pretty neat.
Mm. It's such a pretty plant as well.
I really love it. When it's blooming and it's just covered in flowers, purple everywhere. That was my favorite part in the late spring, early summer. Yeah, it's beautiful. It definitely gains its name.
Mm. How different is it from, oh, what's the other one? Is it Black Nightshade or Woody Nightshade? I can't remember the name. There's another one where
Yeah, black nightshade and woody nightshade. They're all in the same family. So people got those three confused a lot, especially in North America because we don't have belladonna here. So a lot of people think bittersweet nightshade or black nightshade is belladonna, even though it's not. Nightshade, aka felonwort. Its Latin name is Solanum dulcamara or dulcamara, and it has purple flowers and red berries and is very poisonous. It can kill children and pets and make an adult very, very ill. Black nightshade has very tiny white flowers and tiny black berries. And the berries are edible when they're fully ripe. And you can eat the greens if you cook them, especially if you blanch them in a couple changes of water first. A lot of indigenous cultures around the world eat black nightshade greens and berries. But in North America and Europe, it's taboo still. We still think it's going to kill us. And belladonna has large bell shaped purple flowers that are fluted with five little sepals. And they have a large blackberry that has a pentagram shaped calyx around it with 5 points. So the berry's much larger on belladonna than either bittersweet nightshade with the red berries or black nightshade with the blackberries. And black nightshade's edible, belladonna very much not edible, bittersweet very much not edible. Black nightshade not as medicinal, but bittersweet nightshade and belladonna are very medicinal. They're more poisonous ones are the more medicinal ones, which is fun. So I need to do a lot more on plant identification and the differences of ones that are commonly misidentified with each other, because that keeps coming up in my herbal career. That's been a theme that repeats over and over again, that people really need to work on their plant identification. And they really want, like, what's growing in my garden? I want to know what this is.
that's what something that I think I've noticed quite a lot where people look at what they've got in their garden and then they're quite surprised to learn that something's poisonous. Like before we started recording, I mentioned that we have rhubarb. in
Yeah.
my garden. Obviously, stalks edible, leaves absolutely not. So, which plants do you think people would be surprised to learn are poisonous that they might actually have in their garden?
And for some people, they're not going to want to hear this, but it's a lot. A lot of our garden plants, our ornamental garden plants, especially the flowers we don't eat, flowers that are just for joy, most of them are poisonous.
Mhm.
So I'm talking daffodils, hyacinths, tulips, what else? Lilies, irises, foxgloves, delphiniums. I can go on and on. Like a lot, especially cottage garden flowers tend to be quite poisonous. So beautiful though, but like a lot. Even something unassuming in your garden can be toxic depending on how you use it. So like I was telling you earlier, violets can have toxins in them. So most people consider violets non-toxic and edible. But people who have tried to eat a salad out of pure violet leaves find out quite quickly it's not the case, as they have explosive diarrhea. Um,
Nice.
yeah, so there are concentrations of constituents in violets that, if we have too much in our bodies, can hurt us. Thankfully, it's mostly diarrhea, but but even like an unassuming plant like that, you have to be careful. One I've learned about recently is water lilies. The majority of them are edible and medicinal and not considered toxic, but they do contain alkaloids that are toxic. If they're concentrated or removed in any way and you try to ingest them or touch your skin to them, they would be toxic to you. But just the water lily itself is fine, right? As Paracelsus says, the poison is in the dose.
Mhm.
Things aren't necessarily innately poisonous. It's all about dose. A
Yeah.
high dose of one plant can be harmless. A high dose of another plant can be deadly. A low dose of another plant can be harmless. A low dose of a different plant can be deadly. So that's the where pharmacists come in, and pharmaceutical companies, where they figure out in the lab how poisonous it is, what's the lethal dose to a human of what body weight, and what dose is medicinally active without harming the person. And that's where we learn. That's how we ended up with a lot of modern medicines, was studying plants like belladonna and the alkaloids they contain, like atropine and scopolamine and hyoscyamine, and learning like they're deadly. They will kill you if extracted from the plant. But if we use them in very low doses, they're useful for all kinds of cool medicinal uses. Anything from IBS to extreme pain to surgery recovery. And we're using them in like anti-nausea patches for like astronauts and like Air Force pilots, things like that. So again, the dose really matters. And a lot of people are always, because of that, people are always like, what's the dose of this? What's the dose of that? And it completely matters on what you're using it for and what part of the plant you're using and why. And so it's not so easy. That's why I like to teach, and because it helps people learn like things. I can't just hand you that information. You have to have this whole
Mhm.
giant stack of information first so you don't hurt yourself, kind of thing.
So if somebody listening to this goes, "Oh my God, I have most of the plants you've just listed in my garden," like if they're just brushing against them, for example, they don't have to suddenly go, "I have to take all those plants out."
No, no. So one of the main misconceptions that I want to get rid of is that poisonous plants don't belong in the garden. Poisonous plants are too dangerous to be in the garden. The reality is they're already in our gardens. We're planting them there on purpose, and we've been doing it for generations. And people aren't dying because people don't eat irises. They're not tasty. You know what? So a lot of these plants aren't a threat. They're only a threat to very small children who put everything in their mouths, and pets who aren't the brightest and put everything in their mouths. So if you have little like babies and toddlers and or small pets that you know are going to go insane, you either need to put up a fence or take it out temporarily until you can train your child like that's poisonous, that's edible, that's medicinal. So I have children. A lot of people ask me that question. I have two little children, and they, well, how have you had a poison garden with two young children? And I've been able to do it because I've been a nature field guide for 20 years. So I've taught my children from since they could understand what I'm saying, this is good, this is bad, this no touch, no touch. And children it's part of our human nature going back thousands of years to identify plants and know bad plant, good plant, right? So that we don't die. So they pick it up really quick. Children learn plant identification way quicker than adults do. And they're really good at it. So I really like to take them mushroom hunting because they're short and they can see really well. But if you teach them like this, eat all the raspberries you want, don't touch the belladonna ever. My kids have always listened.
Mm-hmm.
But I also have used fencing. So where I just say, don't go in that garden, don't play in it, don't touch anything in it. And if you have, kids or pets that don't listen, you can use electric fencing, like really gentle electric fencing. You just get a little bzzz if you try to go into the garden. Mm-hmm. They make a lot of like small garden sized ones now, usually to keep out rabbits and things, but it'll keep out children and small dogs.
Yeah.
I've never had problems with cats and poisonous plants, but there are, the odd cat that's not very bright and will chew on anything green. And if that's your cat, then you shouldn't have them indoors as houseplants, period. Mm-hmm. And you should have a fenced area, possibly with electric fencing, if you really want to have these plants. But for the most part, especially outdoor animals like dogs and cats that are allowed outdoors, they're not going to be eating your irises and your daffodils. They don't care. They'd rather chew on grass or something more palatable. Mm-hmm. A lot of the poisonous plants, they're poisonous where they have like oxalic crystals that can burn your mouth if they're ingested raw. And a lot of animals just instinctually avoid that. So it hasn't really been a problem. You have to worry about things like foxgloves and belladonna for sure, though. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But they do belong in our gardens. They belong in ecosystems. Poisons are, how the trend of wildlife gardening, where you garden for the wildlife. Mm-hmm. Poisons are an important part of that. A lot of wildlife is dependent upon poisonous plants and pollinating poisonous plants. Mm-hmm. So if you love bumblebees, you should plant more poisonous plants because bumblebees love poisonous plants. You'll have all the bumblebees you can handle in your yard if you plant things like foxgloves or delphiniums. They love belladonna too. And I've noticed I have more fireflies because I have poisonous plants. Fireflies are toxic and they get their toxins from ingesting poisonous plants and ingesting other poisonous like little critters. They're kind of carnivorous. So they are very beneficial to our ecosystems on a large scale and a small backyard garden scale. So if wildlife gardening is important to someone, I encourage them to add and spread around more poisonous plants. So a lot of them are very attractive. There's a lot of native poisonous plants too that you can add. And usually most field guides will have an entire poisonous section in the back that you could thumb through. And a lot of them are beautiful ornamentals. So why not? But yeah, that's one misconception that drives me a bit nuts is that people think that you should get all the poisons out of your garden. Mm. And I'm more like, you should get the noxious invasives that destroy all your other plants out of your garden.
Yeah, I know we got a rabbit when I was younger and he lived in the house, but he did get to go in the garden as well. And he never touched the leaves on the daffodils or the bluebells. He just ignored them because he'd just eat all the dandelions. And he really loved blackberry leaves as well. He would stuff himself on those. So he he always went for things like nasturtiums that were edible and just ignored anything that was going to hurt him. And I'm just like, well, if he's going to avoid it, then I probably should. That was my rule of thumb.
And a lot of animals are smart. They know what they can eat and what they can't eat. Mm. Like they have to usually be desperate or like starving in winter to start eating things that would poison them. Mm. Like here, the deer will do that. In winter, if they've exhausted every other food source, they'll start eating things that is toxic to them.
Yeah. Is there any truth in the rumor then that people have said about reindeer eating like fly agaric mushrooms and things? Because is that true? Like, I just love the idea of these like hallucinating reindeer. Like, is that a thing?
I think people assume that animals react the way humans do to poisons and alkaloids, and they generally don't. So Animals that are immune to toxins, so like birds and insects that can pollinate or ingest poisonous plants, are generally immune to them and they're not getting high, they're not hallucinating. Rabbits are interesting because they contain an enzyme that breaks down belladonna. So they make themselves poisonous. Wild rabbits, don't feed belladonna to your
Yeah.
domestic rabbits, but wild rabbits can ingest belladonna in the wild, and I think it's called, I'm gonna I'm gonna pronounce it wrong. Atropinterase. No, that's not it. It's but it's an enzyme named after atropine that breaks down atropine in the rabbit system, so that their body becomes poisonous, so a predator won't eat them, but they themselves don't get poisoned and they don't hallucinate. There's a lot of birds that can eat like belladonna berries and snowberries, and they don't get poisoned and they don't hallucinate. So if you're seeing an animal that looks like it's hallucinating, it's probably drunk on a fermented berry.
All right.
Like rowan berries.
Mhm.
When I was a kid, we called them drunk berries. If there's a couple of frosts and the berries start to ferment, or crab apples do this too, the birds, especially ones that are about to migrate, will have a feast. They'll get incredibly drunk and fall down and pass out like an old man who had too many beers at the pub. And so I used to help them, so they don't get eaten by predators. And occasionally they'll smack into windows and go like, yeah, need some human help. But it's usually an alcohol fermentation that they're enjoying. They're not usually hallucinating. But there are animals that eat fly agaric, but they're not necessarily having the same effects that we would have. But like
Mhm.
foxes, squirrels, they'll eat mushrooms. Squirrels are found to be immune to the hallucinogens and toxins in amanita mushrooms. So yeah, they're not getting high. They're just having a snack.
That
But
sounds.
but they do animals do enjoy altered states. So they will get drunk on purpose, but a lot of them aren't affected. The
Mhm.
ones that can eat these poisons aren't affected by them usually. Yeah.
Do those animals get hangovers then, or do they just process the sugar differently, do you
I
think?
don't think we know. They'd have to be able to talk to us to tell us like, "Oh man, that was awful."
Oh, that's just a weird mental image.
But I want to look up studies now that you've said that. Hey, do animals get hangovers?
So if anyone wanted to actually grow a poisonous plant and start a poison garden, which one makes a good beginner plant, perhaps from how easy they are to get started? Because I know some plants are easier from seed, other ones it's better if they're already a little bit established, but also in terms of, I guess, maintenance, because everyone forgets that once you've planted something, you have to look after it as well. So what makes a good low maintenance beginner plant, I guess?
That's hard to answer because a lot of people don't have outdoor growing
Hmm.
spaces these days. They live in apartments or they might not even have a balcony. But a lot of house plants are actually poisonous and we're not aware of it.
Hmm.
Like trailing pothos, the just green leaf vine, quite
Oh,
poisonous.
okay.
Monstera, poisonous. So there's quite a few house plants that are poisonous that they just don't advertise that. So I would recommend, if you don't have an outdoor space at all, that you could just look for house plants, because a lot of them are tropical, or from temperate regions, and they can handle a lot of abuse. Like mother-in-law's tongue, like it doesn't need to be watered. So if you're the kind of person who forgets to water it, that's a good one to have. For outdoors, if you have whether you have a small space or a large space, it's going to depend if you have sun or shade. So nightshades are a bit tricky. I wouldn't recommend them for beginners, not because they're not easy to grow, but because the management and the pest control is really annoying.
Hmm.
So, because there's always potato beetles and things trying to eat them.
Hmm.
Great. Um, what's a good big? Well, anything with a bulb is incredibly easy. Daffodils, tulips, hyacinths, very easy to grow. All you have to do is buy your bulbs, plant them in the fall, and that's it.
Hmm.
And sometimes you don't, once they're established, you don't even have to water them. If you plant them in the fall, you don't need to water them unless there's an actual drought. I find them to be incredibly low maintenance and beautiful. So like you don't have to do anything, and every spring you have these gorgeous flowers around you. You don't have to do anything at all. Just enjoy them. And occasionally, like after a few years, 3 to 5 years, you're gonna have to divide them. Just this, that means they've produced more bulbs. You just break them up and spread them out. That's the most maintenance there is. So that I recommend for sure. If you really want to start a poisonous garden, you don't know a lot about it, and you're new to gardening and you're not comfortable, bulbs are really easy. You can buy them in bulk. They have a lot of sales and they're easily available everywhere.
Hmm.
Yeah, for sure. Love bulbs.
Yeah. I must admit, I had no idea until fairly recently how nice daffodils actually smell.
They're so nice. And there's different varieties with different smells.
Is there?
Yeah. I really want to get the poet's daffodil this fall and plant it. It's white with a yellow center with a red ring around it. And it's the one they use the most in perfumery, especially in France. A lot of people do not like the smell of some of them, however. So, like, paper whites have a bad name for having a really strong smell, but I think it's really pleasant. One of my children hates it. So when I have them at Christmas indoors, he's like, "Oh, what does that stink?" And I'm like, "It's my pretty flowers. Just don't come in the living room." But yeah, so some of them are a bit strong, but I really love it. It's like floral with a hint of death and a little bit of like a hay and like meadow kind of hint to it. Yeah, I like it, but it is definitely not for everyone.
Hmm.
But if you love smelling things, there's specific narcissus that smell beautiful. Like I said, the poet's daffodil. Some irises smell amazing. They can smell anything like grape candy to a really expensive perfume. So if you're someone who loves irises, you can get some really beautiful smelling varieties. And that's the cool thing about poisonous plants is they can be beautiful, they can smell beautiful, they can come in beautiful colors. It doesn't need to be like a wild, weedy, forest-looking garden to grow poisons.
Mm. That's always good to know.
Yeah, you can have a very cottage garden through all the seasons.
Mm. And everything's poisonous.
Yes, that's my goal. Not everything. I am a rose gardener.
Mm.
I do have things. I do believe in diversity, especially in my little ecosystem. So I have a mix of poisonous plants, edible medicinals that aren't poisonous, and a lot of native plants because I want the wildlife to be happy as well as me. So I try to have a little bit of everything.
Where do you stand on plants like nettles then? Because I know they've got a huge number of like medicinal benefits and things like that, but obviously unless you cook them properly, you're gonna get stung. So where do they sit on the scale of poisonous plants?
That's a tricky one, right? Because where you are, they're a native plant, and where I am, they're very invasive
Oh.
and they're not native. So people should be ripping them out.
Hmm.
Same thing with mullein, right? Mullein's not poisonous, but people here should be ripping it out. They shouldn't be growing it. Um, it's a little controversial. I love mullein. It's a great herb, but I don't want millions of mullein seeds in my garden.
Mm.
So when one pops up, I top it. I cut they're biennial. So if you cut the flowers off, it won't come back next year.
Mm. Right. Oh,
So,
good to know.
but with nettle, it grows a lot out here, especially in waste areas, roadsides, old abandoned farms. It's everywhere. It's all over my neighborhood. It's all over my parents' family farm, and they don't really manage it. They just mow it. Or yeah, I don't recommend the weed whacker though, especially if you're not wearing like
Yeah.
full pants, full long sleeves, face guard. I don't recommend weed whacking because it goes everywhere, and you don't want those little stingers hitting any part of your body. But a lot of people here just mow it down, especially like they just see where it is in the spring and they mow it and they just keep mowing it, and eventually it won't come back. But
Oh.
some people grow it on purpose. You just have to be a good weeder because it
Hmm.
has quite a lot of seeds. One plant can produce a lot of seeds. So really good gloves, like rose gardening gloves, I would recommend because they're meant to handle all kinds of thorns and nasty things. So if you use rose gardening gloves when you're picking your nettle or you're weeding your nettle, it's a little bit easier to manage and you won't get stung.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I suppose that's the thing with plants, the fact that what can be native and perfectly beneficial to one ecosystem is just a horrible invasive weed in another.
Yeah, and you never know until it's introduced and you see the havoc it wreaks.
Yeah, we've got that with bindweed and knotweed, I think, are two of the big.
Oh,
Yeah. Yeah.
anywhere temperate, those are just the worst. Here, the bindweed is an annual and it dies.
Hmm.
So you can just smother it and it won't come back.
Hmm.
But in where I'm from in British Columbia, it's a perennial and you can't get rid of it ever. it's just there forever. Enjoy. Pretty much have to have like hire a backhoe to come and dig out your whole garden and replace the soil. Yeah, you never know. It's really good to pay attention to what is native to your area and what is non-native, but also not invasive.
Hmm.
Because not all non-natives are bad or evil. So like we were talking about the bulbs, right? So like tulips and daffodils are not native here at all, but they don't harm any of the native plants. They don't spread maliciously. They're not noxious. They just live their little life quietly. But there are plants, obviously, that are just absolutely nasty and take over the world, like Japanese knotweed, rip up your foundation and everything.
Yeah, it always makes me think whenever you watch like, post-apocalyptic films and there's just plants everywhere, you're like, that's gonna be knotweed.
It's going to be Japanese knotweed and blackberry and bindweed and morning glories, the whole world. Yeah.
Oh, what's the other one that's invasive? The buddleias are actually invasive, but
Okay.
quite a lot of people planted them after the war because they break up concrete. So obviously we had all these wastelands where you couldn't do anything with them. So they just planted buddleias, and I think I've got a dwarf buddleia in the front garden because it's good for the pollinators. But yeah, when you see how fast it grows, you can see why National Rail spends so much money trying to get rid of buddleias every year because they just obviously
Yikes.
you hang over the track and it's just a pain.
Yeah. So it's good to learn about that. Like, don't just learn that non natives are evil, learn about what's best for your area, what will grow best in your climate, what will not strangle everything in your garden, because you don't know until you see it. Like I have, it's called bloody geranium. I'm not swearing at it. It's actually called bloody geranium and it takes over the entire world. It's a ground cover, but it's a very tall, bushy ground cover. So if you don't have a very large property, don't plant bloody geranium.
Mm.
Unfortunately, the previous owner of my house planted it and
Oh,
now it's in every single flower bed. So now I have to weed it all out.
ugh, always fun.
It's not very poisonous though. So I guess we should get back to topic.
Well, one of the things I was going to ask, and this is always a really awkward question to ask anyone when they've got a specialist subject, but do you have a favorite poisonous plant?
I have several. I can't just pick one, obviously. It's been too long doing this. My favorites are the nightshades.
Hmm.
They're my precious. I just adore them. Belladonna and Datura, I really love. Datura just smells like nothing. Just the flowers alone, like I just want to grow it for the flowers. Belladonna, I love it for medicine, but it is a very beautiful plant.
Hmm.
And henbane, it has some bad rap as like a weedier one, but I think it's quite beautiful. I think especially white henbane can be a really good ornamental, and it's really quick growing, so you can grow several crops in like one season. Like if it starts dying, you can just plant seeds and grow more. And mandrake is just amazing, and I don't think a lot of people realize it can be a house plant. It does
Oh,
actually pretty decently as a house plant. It doesn't like full sunlight. It's a spring ephemeral where it grows native, but as a house plant, it will have leaves pretty much all year. In
hmm.
the wild, the leaves will die in the summer and the whole plant will look dead. It's a lot like a crocus that way.
Hmm.
So if you think of it more like that, but then when you bring it inside as a house plant, it does actually pretty well, especially with bright indirect light. And the ancient Egyptians actually used it as a house plant and a potted plant. They had it by their ponds and their little gardens in the cities. They had it in their houses in little pots. It was very popular. So it doesn't have to be unattainable or unreachable. Yeah. Nightshades can, be part of everyday life. I usually always have datura or belladonna in my garden. Henbane, not always. Depends on my seed starting setup. Right now,
Mm.
I don't have a good seed starting setup, so I don't have my henbane this year, which I'm sad about. So I'm gonna work on that. But what else is my favorites? I really, really am obsessed with narcissus the last few years. It has amazing folklore around it that most people are probably unaware of, dating back to ancient Egypt, again, like
Mhm.
thousands of years of lore. It's associated with rebirth, with death. Um, they used to stuff the bulbs in the eyes of mummies or put them at their feet or tuck them in their hands so they're all wrapped up. Originally, scientists thought that it was onions,
Oh, okay.
And there was this really cool study at the worst, how do you pronounce, is it Warklaw, Poland?
Might be Wroclaw.
It might be.
Mm.
They had a couple of mummies on display, and then a researcher recognized one of them and said, "Hey, you should study this." And they did, and they found out that it contained narcissus bulbs, and they realized that multiple mummies that they had been aware of for a very long time contained narcissus bulbs. It was very cool. And they also used it as a perfume in ancient Egypt too. And I believe it was definitely a perfume in ancient Greece and Rome. It was used in the Middle East. There's a famous salve called Narcissamum that was written of by several ancient historians that was made out of the flowers. And it was used, depending on how it was prepared, it could be a perfume or it could be a medicine.
Hmm.
Narcissus are incredibly medicinal. They're really cool. I've been started working with oils with using the root that I've been growing myself. And yeah, they're crazy good for any kind of skin issues.
Hmm.
Yeah, so like a weird mole you have, or skin infections, infected wounds, things like that. Then there's also really cool ancient beauty recipes using the bulbs for smoothing and brightening the skin, making like evening the skin tone. So if you have like discoloration or uneven texture, it smooths everything. And it is starting to be used by modern cosmetic companies. I think Estee Lauder uses narcissus root in some of their creams these days. But yeah, so I'm really obsessed with narcissus. Probably almost equally to the nightshades, almost. Yeah. Those are my favorites right now. Narcissus and the main nightshades. So it'd be like belladonna, mandrake, henbane, scopolia. I also grow nicandra, sometimes, which is also called shoe fly, which is from South America. Has really beautiful purple flowers. So like if people want to get started with nightshades, the easiest ones to grow are datura and henbane and nicandra.
Hmm.
You basically just put the seeds in soil and water them.
Yeah.
Easy peasy. Just be careful about like touching them once they're plants.
Well, that was the thing I found fascinating. I was in Italy in June, and in a couple of places, I was like walking down the street, and you know when you get like big planters just in the
Yeah.
street, and then you go, "Oh, what's that pretty plant?" And one of them was oleanders, which I was like, "Wow."
Ooh, very poisonous.
And then further down, it was like there was just this whole like bush of datura just in the middle of the street, and I was like, wow, you would not see that in an English sort of town centre at all. I mean, we're lucky if we get well anything really, but it tends to be things like nasturtiums and pansies are quite popular and so on. But I thought you would never suddenly see a bush of datura in
Oh,
the
you
middle
would
of.
now. Yeah. I've noticed a trend in landscaping, even like municipal and like city landscaping, where they're starting to incorporate poisonous plants. So, one town over from me, one year did castor bean everywhere. They
Okay.
did the red one and the green one, big planters, any kind of boulevard strip of gardening in front of the business stretches. It was just the whole main street was castor bean.
Hmm.
It was really cool. I took a bunch of photos, and Montreal is really cool for that too, because it's a very green city. There's lots of trees and planters and gardens everywhere, even right downtown. And I go and there's, like tobacco as an ornamental and castor bean as an ornamental and irises, like huge irises. And they're growing out of season. I don't know how they do that, but I've been seeing more and more, especially more modern and experimental landscapers are using poisons. Datura is a dramatic one because the plants can get quite large
Hmm.
and they bloom. They're very long blooming. They just
Yeah.
die if you get too many frosts.
Probably that's why Italy might grow them then. I mean, I was surprised at the size of the flowers. You were talking about a good like 7, 8 inches long, and I was like, they're massive.
They're very huge. Datura, especially Datura wrightii in North America, is one of the biggest flowers in all of North America after the yellow lotus. It's just they're huge.
Mm.
They're unexpectedly huge. One year in my garden in my previous village, I grew probably two or three. I couldn't even count over 200 daturas in one of my big garden plots. But it was right by the road, and even though my road, I'm the only person on my road. I got a lot of dog walkers, and there's a few people living on the ends of my street.
Mm.
And I didn't have a fence up at the time, but I kept noticing like my neighbors kept sneaking into my garden to stare at the datura and to smell the datura because they're like, what is that? They're huge.
Mm.
And you could smell them from the road because they bloom at night. And I had datura noxia. Yeah, so I put up a fence after that. But but a lot of people don't realize just how big datura can get. Even belladonna can reach like 6 feet.
Really?
If it's happy, it
Mm.
can be a very large plant. And then you add how big the roots are onto that. Like some of these plants can be as big or bigger than a human.
Mm. Well, that's a scary thought, I guess.
Well, if you think of them the way that your European ancestors did, a lot of them thought of them as like nature spirits or like elves, and would treat them like not like people necessarily, but like a demigod a little
Mm.
bit, where you knew like even whether it was smaller than you or bigger than you would treat it with respect and talk to it very carefully, kind of thing. I found a really cool anecdote from the Folklore of Plants by Thistleton Dyer, where he recounted in France how someone told him about how rural people would speak to belladonna like it was some kind of like godlike elf
Mhm.
and would ask it for favors, but it was really important to keep the plant alive and not kill the plant. So you would just go to the plant, and if you gave it a gift, you had to repeat that gift consistently.
Mhm.
So, like if you gave it part of your lunch, like once a week, you'd have to go and give it part of your lunch, especially if you asked it for something like
Yeah.
prosperity. They usually people ask for prosperity and money because everyone was poor, or food. They'd ask for food, prosperity, that kind of thing.
Mm.
So it was treated a little bit like a mandrake Alron, except a living one that you would visit in the woods, which is kind of cool. And then a lot of European cultures, their folk names for belladonna are like Lady of the Woods or Grand Lady, or like it was very personified in the
Mm.
folklore, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, I always sort of feel like the idea of like the beautiful woman and the idea that you would sort of hallucinate this beautiful woman if you'd been using it. I always kind of go, now would you be hallucinating it though?
What if it's her? What
Yeah.
if it's the plant spirit talking to you?
I mean, if you're going to be nice to any plant, that would be one I would want to keep on side.
Yes, you want to be nice to belladonna, she'll be nice to you.
And I think this is one of the things that we see with any kind of plants, the discussion around this idea that if something's natural, it must be safe. And I see this online quite a lot where people sort of don't like sort of contemporary medicine because they're like, or West medicine anyway, because they're like, oh, it's made by a pharmaceutical company, it must be bad. And I'm like, yes, but technically uranium's natural, but that doesn't make it safe. And given you've obviously mentioned how a lot of the drug companies obviously use these plants in order to make the medicines that people then won't take because they're not natural, where did this weird binary sort of come from? And do you think it's particularly harmful in how people then approach plants?
I think it is very harmful, and I have noticed it creeping into the culture. I'm in Canada, but I've noticed it creeping into North American culture and then creeping into the UK and Ireland and Europe as well. And now it's full blown turned into the MAHA movement in the United
Mm.
States, Make America Healthy Again,
Yeah.
where they've gone full crunchy conspiracy theory, unfortunately. It's very dangerous because of the attitude that if it's natural, it won't hurt me. And that's simply not true. Like we said earlier, a lot of plants, even ones that don't seem harmful, contain toxins at a certain level.
Hmm.
So it's how you're using the plant that matters. It's not about whether the plant is safe or not because it's natural. So I think a lot of this movement is coming from ignorance,
Hmm.
just a straight up lack of knowledge about plants and herbalism and medicine, conventional medicine and herbalism, and how they work and with plants and what parts are used and how the medicines are extracted. I think it's ignorance in that it's definitely coming partially from the hippie crowd and the hippie movement where natural is better. Unfortunately, like what started off as like with good intentions has morphed into something that's become a bit of a monster, unfortunately, over the last few decades. So now we have people who are trying to encourage people to ingest herbs or use herbs that are very poisonous. So I see people telling or teaching other people to ingest belladonna, which I would never recommend. After reading all the studies I've read and all of the world conferences on nightshade poisoning in food, like it's just a huge no, like the things it can do to your body. Like you won't die immediately necessarily, but it will cause permanent long-term damage to your body and your brain. Like, but most people I know who are passing on the misinformation are not actually reading scientific studies. Because the type of people who think natural is better and safe don't usually read science-based information.
Yeah.
They're usually picking up books from other folk herbalists who have also not read science-based information. So there are a lot of herbalists that are not on that trend that combine traditional herbalism with science. And I always recommend seeking out those people that openly say, science is good, science is important, science will keep you alive. And I think people need to understand that modern medicines and pharmaceuticals are not evil. The companies overcharging for the medicine are evil.
Yeah.
That is evil. Charging 400% of the cost of insulin is evil, but insulin is not evil. Insulin saved lives.
Yeah.
So belladonna is not safe. It's natural. It's not safe. It's been used. It's one of the first chemical weapons on the planet, along with aconite. It's not safe at all, but in very low doses, it can help with all kinds of things. But the low doses are not something that should be done by a home herbalist or a folk herbalist. It's something that should be done by a medical herbalist or a clinical herbalist with a science background. So it's a fine line, right? I think people need to get out of their comfort zones more. I see a lot of people that get trapped in what I call a filter bubble, where it's information that you hide in the bubble and only read or accept information that you want. Especially online with the algorithms, they just are trained to feed you more of what you want and what you've already looked at.
Yes.
They're not going to give you information outside of your bubble. So if you only read books written by folk herbalists and the Maha crowd, you're not going to ever see the scientific information. You're not going to see the herbalists that are also working with science. You're only going to see what's in your filter bubble. So to burst that bubble, you have to get out of your comfort zone and you have to read and absorb information outside of that bubble. So if you're like, oh, that's me, I've only been reading herbal books written by occultists or like independent folk herbalists who are taught, like self-taught. If you catch yourself, then it's time to start reading scientific studies on plants or to find a herbalism reference book, not an anecdotal one, that is written by a clinical herbalist or a trained registered herbalist that has a science background or has incorporated science. It's like a formulary is a really good idea. So get out of your bubble. Even if you're absorbing like video content on YouTube, TikTok, etc., find the herbalists, find the scientists, find the botanists. I follow a lot of botanists. So to get out of your bubble, I recommend curating your online presence better. So, and actually sit down and block out time to seek out botanists and scientists and add them to your feed and make sure that you're liking their content when it comes up so you keep seeing it. And you'll learn a lot more outside of the bubble. You might learn opinions you hadn't seen in your bubble. So the biggest thing with the natural movement is people really get stuck in the bubble. And where I live in a rural area that attracts a very large hippie community, and they very much have that attitude of natural is better, science is bad, science is lying to us. And unfortunately, a lot of them get very ill and they don't go to the hospital. A lot of them die young. And they're teaching their children this. And a lot of them are also anti-technology.
Hmm.
So they're not able to access the internet or YouTube or online books or scientific studies. A lot of them are only able to access like a communal library in
Hmm.
person kind of thing that they would have on their commune kind of thing. So what I've noticed is that complete cutoff from information is really harmful. And there's a lot of people in North America right now living that lifestyle where they do the homesteading dream,
Hmm.
but in the hippie way, not in the trad wife conservative Christian way. And they're both promoting the exact same type of natural medicine, even though they're have opposing religious and political views. They both have the same beliefs about plants and herbs and medicine. And that's becoming increasingly dangerous because these two groups are combined are very large. And it's
Yeah.
going to have an effect on our greater culture, unfortunately, for the worse. People are going to become more distrustful of medicine,
Hmm.
more distrustful of doctors, more distrustful of science at the exact time when we shouldn't be doing that. When we
Yeah.
need scientists, we need to address the climate crisis. We need to not ignore these things. So I'm scared a little bit as a herbalist who's been watching this trend and seeing even the big mainstream publishers jump on the trend
Hmm.
and promote books by people who don't know anything at all, who are just lying to people how to treat your cancer with herbs, you know?
Yeah, I always get really sad is one word, I suppose, but there are other adjectives I could use when people just completely reject contemporary medicine, and as I say again, Western medicine, and you sort of think, well, I don't really know how you could use herbs to, for example, my brother's had a hip replacement. I don't really think you can fix that kind of problem with herbs. So it's like,
All you could do is relieve pain and inflammation until he dies.
and it's like my dad survived a heart attack because he had stents fitted. So I'm like, hooray for technology. I see that as a good thing. It is concerning, I think. And I think the people who listen to this podcast, because obviously I've had Sarah from Ronin Sage on before as well,
Cool.
kind of have that sort of awareness of actually these things coexist and that's fine. But it also leads me on to my next question, and this is one of the things that really makes me quite annoyed, is when I see herbalism books and witchy books and occult books written with AI. And obviously, there's been stories about people buying guides to identify these things written with AI. And obviously, as you can imagine, how that goes. And do you think that's a problem that's going to get worse when people are going to just buy something because it's pretty and the design is right, but the content's terrible? And then again, people like you whose voices are really needed are going to kind of get drowned out by the slop? Or do you think the publishers are going to be like, hang on, we've actually got a legal duty of care to our readers to not kill them, so maybe we should get actual authors? How do you see that one playing out?
I see it very similar to what we just talked about, the trend. It's a very alarming trend that I've also been keeping an eye on. And it's an unethical one and a harmful one. There's going to be a lot more people ending up in the ER
Hmm.
because of doing something a book told them to do that ended up being wrong and potentially fatal or harmful to them. I think it's similar to a lot of our regulations around the internet and copyright. The technology is faster than the law.
Hmm.
if if the law had been concurrent, I think that we it wouldn't be happening. I think we would have laws where these types of information should not be written by AI. There is zero guarantee that this information can be 100% factual when written by AI.
Yeah.
And especially when it comes to plant identification and medicinal info, especially when you be ingesting a plant or touching a plant, it's really dangerous to have AI write. It's dangerous to have people write. It's equally bad, in my opinion, to have AI write the book as it is to have someone who doesn't have sufficient knowledge writing a book on herbalism. I've seen some very scary books on herbalism that are not AI, and I've seen some very scary books that are AI, and both need to be addressed. I think a main issue is that occult publishing, especially, doesn't really fact check very well or at all because it's spiritual, it's not scientific info. Whereas if you're publishing for, what's the name of that? Like Springer, or what is it? Springer, Springlink? I can't remember.
Yeah, Springer took over Palgrave and Macmillan.
Thank you. Okay, so like if you're publishing with Springer or Palgrave, they're going to vet you. They're
Mm-hmm.
going to look into who you are. They're going to look at your previous writings. They're going to go over every single thing you write with a fine-tooth comb to make sure it's factual and true. Occult publishing, it's going to be the very independent minority that's going to do that. The majority are pumping out books quicker than you can imagine. And a lot of them are not fact-checked at all, like at all.
Mm-hmm.
It's just considered personal gnosis. And that's fine for most occult books, personal, as long as they're upfront about it, that it's personal gnosis. But when it comes to the poison path and working with poisonous plants and herbs, then it's not the same. It needs to be gone over with a fine-tooth comb and fact-checked. And they're not doing that. I see a lot of books on the poison path that should have been very heavily edited and vetted, and were not.
Mm-hmm.
And some of them are the most popular books out there on that topic. And I don't see anyone calling them out because a lot of the people reading them don't have the knowledge to realize the mistakes or the lack of knowledge. So it's another bubble. It's another
Mm-hmm.
information bubble that's been created. So I think people need to be very careful. Like especially when you're buying a book from an online site like Amazon, like a very large website, they're not going to necessarily outright having flashing letters that it's written by AI. You're going to have to actually really look into it. Is this author real? Is this a real human being that exists? Are they anywhere else on the internet? It can be hard because a lot of authors are using pen names. So they might not exist anywhere on the internet except for those books that they've written. That can be a bit hard. But generally an AI book won't have like peer reviews or blurbs or quotes from other authors. It'll have an author that has no online presence, no website, no portfolio online. Like that book is the only thing they're associated with. And then the cover is usually a little, not always, some of the covers can be good, but some of the covers can be quite bad. Especially if it's an ebook, it's more likely to be AI than a physical published book. But people really have to learn how to vet for AI content. It's getting harder and harder with images, but books, like Google the author.
Mm-hmm.
Do they exist? Do they have a Facebook page? Do they have an Instagram? Do they interact with their readers in any way? Do they exist in any way in the real world? And if the answer is no, there's a good chance it's AI or it's ghost written slop at the very least. Yeah. So definitely people need to train themselves to actually do the work. Don't be lazy, like actually look and research the authors. And not just AI, but any book about herbs that is giving information, especially on dangerous herbs, fact check the author. Like, do they have the background to talk about this?
Yeah.
You know, are they a trained herbalist or are they a hairdresser?
Mm-hmm.
Has this person ever had a garden in their lives? I've seen like green witch books and gardening books written by people who've never had a garden, have maybe had one potted plant their whole life. So like you need to look into the person. Like, are they an expert in their topic at all?
Yeah.
And I don't think people vet authors and books enough, whether they're AI or not. And I don't think that the harm being done is malicious. I think it's carelessness and ignorance mostly. But I think that there should be consequences if people get harmed.
Yeah.
I think our laws need to catch up with AI for sure.
Definitely. And you've mentioned the poison path there, and that's something that people may have run into if they've looked at like poisonous plants
Yeah.
and the occult more than poisonous plants and just straight up folklore. So how would you describe the poison path and why can that sometimes be a little bit not dangerous territory perhaps, but not necessarily presented the way that it should be?
So the poison path technically originated from Dale Pendle, who is an American computer engineer. A lot of people think he's an ethnobotanist, but he wasn't. He was a computer engineer whose hobby was learning and writing about plants. And even though he specifically says in his writings that he believes the poison path is multifaceted, the people who have gone on to spread the poison path have primarily focused on hallucinogenic poisonous plants. So the poison path, though it started off as Dale Pendle's curiosity about the effects of plants and what they can do, and the importance of poisons in human culture. It's morphed into what plant can get me high.
Right.
What part of this plant can get me high? And then it's gone from there and morphed into spirit and the other world can only be accessed by getting high, or it's more effective through a poisonous hallucinogenic plant, which is incorrect in my opinion. So I started off on the poisonous path because I defined it similarly to Dale Pendle. But the longer I was on it, the more I realized people aren't defining it the same as me. So about a year and a half, 2 years ago, I sat down and really researched what's going on right now with the poison path. Who are the people speaking for it, claiming it, walking it, writing about it? What are they saying? And the majority of information that I received was the people, again, are associating it with drugs and getting high, whether recreationally or for spiritual reasons. And then it was probably the other 50% were people trying to make a profit off of that interest. So people trying to run shops similar to mine, but with a different intention, where they were specifically having products to get high or marketing it as you might get high, not necessarily whether it's true or not. There's definitely a lot of ambiguity in a lot of the products, whether it's a micro amount or a medically dosed amount. So again, because of ignorance. So I find I stepped away from the poison path. I stopped referring to any of my work as being associated with the poison path. I stopped using the term in my website and my social media presence for that reason, because it was definitely attracting the wrong kind of person to my work. My work isn't about getting high. My work is about the plants and their importance in biodiversity, in human culture, in our gardens, to our wildlife. That's what I like to focus on, as well as the medicinal uses of these plants. Whereas I find a lot of people just get stuck on, can I trip balls with this? There's definitely especially in North America, I find the entheogenic festival culture bled into the occult community, and they've all ended up kind of stuck where they think there's nothing more important than the hallucinogenic properties of a plant. I had to even stop using the word psychoactive because a majority of people that I talk to assume it means hallucinogenic, when instead it's a term used to describe specific types of herbal actions. Psychoactive means mind altering, not in a hallucinogenic way, but in a mood way. So any plant that can affect your mood or your behavior is psychoactive. And that can include chocolate, catnip, your SSRIs you took this morning for depression. Those are all psychoactive. But every time I use the term, that's not what people heard. They heard hallucinogenic. So I had to stop using either phrase altogether. Now, when I say poisonous, I mean poisonous. Whereas I noticed people were thinking when I said poisonous that I meant drugs. And a lot of people on the poison path now think that poison is synonymous with drugs. And I'm here to say it is not. Poison means poison. It's not a euphemism. It's not a dog whistle. It means poison. It means will harm you. It will harm. It causes harm. Baneful means causes death. So I want to make it clear that you can follow the poison. There's nothing wrong with liking drugs. I want to clarify that. Drugs are great. Drugs are good. I love drugs too. Who doesn't love a good drug? However, certain poisons are so poisonous they should not be used as recreational or spiritual drugs. They are so poisonous. It doesn't matter that indigenous cultures use them. If you're not that indigenous culture who was raised in that culture with the traditional knowledge of how to safely use that plant, I think you shouldn't be using that plant and you should be cautious. So I think people need to be more careful. I think people need to be educating themselves a bit more and be a bit more proactive about reading books, especially in the occult community. I always recommend reading books outside of the occult community that are not written by occultists, especially when it comes to plants and herbs and poisons and mushrooms. You need to be reading books by botanists, by mycologists, by scientists, by ethnobotanists. they're going to have information and knowledge that the occult community is just not going to have, that they're just lacking. And I think multidisciplinary study is just the best way to go. You got to have information from everybody to best inform yourself and keep yourself safe. So I don't call it anything anymore. I don't say I follow the poison path. I just love poisonous plants, and I'm a gardener and a forager. So I teach about these plants and how they can be used as food and medicine, or just simply for their beauty. And yeah, I just basically, this is the first time I publicly stated, like, hey, I'm not all about drugs. Could you stop emailing me asking me to get high? Please stop. Thank you. I'm not about that anymore. So anyone that was interested in the poisonous path, like me, and has realized, oh crap, it's actually the entheogenic community taking a more spiritual bent to it, then get outside that bubble is my recommendation. If that's not where you wanted to go with poisonous plants, get outside that bubble, get outside the occult poison plant bubble, because right now it's all about drugs. Again, I love drugs, but some of these plants should not be used that way. Yeah. And even externally can be dangerous. It's like datura. Datura is a good example. So datura is safer when used externally, much safer, because it's very dangerous to pass through your digestive system. That's where it can cause the most damage. So obviously, externally, it's not going to go through your digestive system, which is great, but you'll still, it does go through the bloodstream, through your skin, so you'll still be able to enjoy the medicinal benefits, which would be pain relief and treating inflammation mostly. It shuts down your central nervous system and it can kill pain anywhere. So it doesn't matter where you apply it, the pain will go away wherever the pain is. But if you do, a lot of people who are, especially the recreational drugs people, think that more is better. So they'll make a very high dose thinking they'll really trip balls, but they just get nightshade poisoning. They get, what is it called? Anticholinergic poisoning, and they end up in the ER. What is it? Mad as a hatter, red as a beet, blind as a bat, etc. Basically, you lose your saliva and your ability to sweat. Your pupils dilate. You get really hot and flushed. You feel really ill. You feel really dizzy, nauseous. You get delirium. You get disoriented. So you might be like, oh, I'm going to trip balls, but instead you get delirium. You don't want delirium. People with delirium end up in the ER.
Yeah.
Or in the special ward until it wears off. So people will think, oh, well, it's natural, it's safe as long as I use it this way. And it's still not safe. You still have to be careful. You still have to know the science and the math to make something out of some of these poisonous plants. You have to know the science and the math, or you're going to hurt yourself or other people.
I think that's one thing I noticed in quite a lot of the new age sort of circles, which obviously are slightly sort of further one way or the other, I guess, from the occult stuff. And that's where they kept using the term plant medicine.
It's unfortunately now plant medicine is a euphemism for drugs.
Yeah.
In North America because of the entheogenic festival community. They used it as a like a secret so that they wouldn't get in trouble. So if you see like plant medicine conference, plant medicine gathering, and you're like, oh, a herbal gathering. Nope, that's not what that is. That, especially if it's California or Oregon or Washington, that is not what that is. That is a straight up recreational drug event. But it started with the entheogenic community, the recreational drug community, and unfortunately it spread. So now I can't use that term for my business or my work in any way, because it means drugs to a lot of people. And unfortunately, I came up when I was doing my research on how the poison path was doing, I found a long list of euphemisms that were just harmless words now mean drugs. So like there's this long list of words that I try not to use now because it means drugs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's also a hearty degree of cultural appropriation in quite a lot of the ones that I've seen where people are using plant medicine to mean like they've gone to the Andes for something. And it's like,
yeah, ayahuasca really bothers me. White people going to South America to do ayahuasca really bothers me. And it bothers the indigenous people. A lot of them are drugging and robbing the white people who come to have this spiritual experience, because they view it as it's basically colonization. They're trying to colonize their traditional medicine without giving anything back
Mm.
other than money.
Mm.
So there was a big ayahuasca ring when I lived in Vancouver that attracted a lot of rich people. And some people would do it once a month. And a lot of them were under the impression they were doing some kind of important spiritual work. And I wanted to go hold their hands and be like, you're not. They thought they were doing something outward for humanity in the world just by getting high, like every 1 to 2 months on ayahuasca. But what was really happening is they were supposed to be doing inner work on themselves with the ayahuasca, but there was only one shaman for 200 people.
Mm.
So there's no guide. And they're all vomiting in buckets and pooping themselves with like one shaman and a few non-high people helping them out. And they genuinely thought they were doing something. And, you want to hold their hands and be like, you were getting high. You're contributing nothing to society. If you can do spirit work without getting high, that helps yourself or others. You don't need to do ayahuasca for that. But it just became the drug of the pop culture at the time. And unfortunately, there's a lot of people that decided to exploit it for money, that didn't know how to use it properly or safely. I've seen that a lot, especially on the West Coast, where people who don't know how to use ayahuasca or mix it properly are getting people high for money to pay their rent.
So we've covered quite a lot in this chat, but if people could only remember one thing about poisonous plants, what's the one thing that you would want them to remember or know?
That they belong in our biodiversity in the wilds and our gardens. They belong. They're supposed to be there. They're not evil just because they're poisonous.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's what I want people to take away. They're important for wildlife. They're important for our medicine. They need to be there, and we need to not shun them.
Mm.
Obviously, if it's a danger to yourself or your household, then you can remove it. But if it's not posing any threat, leave it alone.
Mm-hmm.
They belong. We shouldn't be going out in the wilds and pulling poisonous plants out just because they're poisonous, especially if they're native.
Mm.
I don't know if this is a habit where you are, but where I am, a lot of people will destroy mushrooms if they even think they're poisonous.
I've not heard of that. I know quite a lot of people have really gotten into foraging lately, so I think there's a renewed, which is weird because we're normally quite a mycophobic country in the UK.
My area is still incredibly mycophobic. I used to run a mushroom business and I had to close it because of how mycophobic my area is. People here, if it's in a lawn, if it's in a schoolyard, even if it's in the woods, they'll destroy them, thinking they won't come back, not understanding how mycelium work. And they try to eradicate them. It's like they're there on purpose.
Mm. I think the most places where I tend to see them, I must admit, would be natural spaces anyway. So you might see them on like fallen wood and stuff
Yeah.
like that, where people kind of understand that's doing its job, it's doing a thing, it's not hurting anyone, you can just leave it
No,
alone. And I think
leave it alone.
I've not heard of anyone. I mean, there's probably someone who destroys them because oh my God, they've disturbed someone's lawn.
Usually people with dogs and children,
Mm,
they think their dog's going to eat the mushroom. Yeah.
yeah.
They'll destroy them outright. And like, I understand the fear. There's some mushrooms are very, very scary. Amanita muscaria is not one of them.
Mm,
Not going to kill you or your pet. But the white amanitas, Amanita bisporigera and Amanita phalloides, woo, those will kill everything and
mm,
everyone. So I can understand, but picking it won't destroy it. It'll just come back.
yeah.
Mushrooms grow incredibly fast. They're not like plants at all. So I wish people would understand that mushrooms are decomposers and they have a job to do. They're the reason that we can live on the planet without it being covered in dead plant refuse.
Mm.
Like we would be buried under mountains of dead plant refuse if mushrooms didn't do their jobs decomposing everything. They basically eat death.
That makes mushrooms sound like the most metal thing ever.
They are the most metal being on the planet. They're crazy cool. But leave them alone unless they're going to actively harm like a child or a pet. Like it's okay to just leave it alone.
Hmm.
They have a short growing life. They'll go away.
I was going to say they don't seem to last that long.
No, they grow in a few days and then they rot and go away. The mycelium isn't going to hurt anyone. It's underground.
Hmm.
You know, no one's digging it up and eating it.
Well, you hope.
You hope. I hope not. A lot of it's not, it's so sparse you couldn't, like it's everywhere in the soil, right? So yeah, that's my one thing is just like they belong here.
Hmm.
And they're a part of nature, just like we are.
Hmm.
And we need to, and they're important. So many, like if you read the World Health Organization's list of essential medicines, so many of them are poisonous plants or poisonous plant derived.
Yeah.
Like belladonna's on there like 5 or 6 times in different forms.
Yeah.
You know, they belong not just in the wilds, but in our gardens and in our culture. They belong in
Hmm.
our medicine. They are in our medicine. They're already here. People just don't realize. I meet a lot of people who think they're forgotten, who think poison as medicine is forgotten, and we don't know how the ancients used these. It's like, no, we're still using them. It never stopped. It's in the British Pharmacopoeia. Go read it. You know, they're not lost, they're not forgotten. They're very much in everyday use all around the world. They're in our yards, in our gardens, in our forests.
Hmm.
Just accept it. Kind of like insects, you know, like insects aren't evil. They're part of nature. You got to accept them.
Hmm.
As poisons are similar in that way. Like it might be the darker side that most people don't want, but they're important. They're equally important.
Yeah, I must admit, I'd much rather have poisonous plants than mosquitoes if I had to choose between the two.
Even I know it's hard, but mosquitoes are pollinators and a really important
Oh,
food source, and only the females bite us.
oh, okay.
The males are important pollinators. I know, like it's if mosquitoes were all wiped out, eventually all life on Earth would be wiped out.
Wow.
We need every insect. We need them.
I still don't like them.
Yeah, I know. It took me when I was younger, I was like that. And the old, you know, as I've aged, I love all the creepy, unloved things. That's why I do what I do. I love poisons, I love insects, I love mushrooms, I love compost. I love soil microbial life, you know, all the creepy little things no one wants to look at that. Yeah, I love it all. And I recommend looking into it. It's an
Mm.
important part of our life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So speaking about what you love, what you do, where can people find you online? Because I know you share so much information about different types of plants, and there's always beautiful photos and what like folklore associated with them and stuff.
Yeah.
So if anyone
So,
likes the kind of stuff I share, they'll love what you share.
oh, thank you. My website is thepoisongarden.com, and I'm going to be adding a blog soon to it. But the majority of my folklore and medicinal lore info right now is available on my Instagram. That's the best place to get the cool herb lore is my Insta, which is also just the dot poison garden. That's
Hmm.
my account there. And I'm also on Facebook and Threads and Blue Sky. But again, the best place for lore is Instagram because they let you have more text.
Mm.
Threads, I do try to post a bit of lore every now and then. Occasionally, I'll go on a binge where I post lore on a specific plant family or a specific type of plant. But I find threaded content doesn't do so well. Where else can you find me? I think that's it for now. Occasionally, I do have an online course, like an introduction to medicinal poison plants through rowan and sage,
Hmm.
that anyone can take. It's a standalone course. So, and it's called Introduction to Low Dose Botanicals because in herbalism, that's what it's called.
Hmm.
Low dose herbs or low dose medicines are herbs or plants that are too poisonous to just use outright.
Yeah.
So they have to be very careful, low doses. So low dose herbs or low dose plants or low dose medicine is like a euphemism for poisonous medicine.
Yeah.
And so that's a really good starting point, whether you're an ordinary person or if you're a herbalist who wants to learn more. I think those are the only two places I'm really spread out right now.
Hmm.
But my website, I want to add a lot more info. I'm just trying to, it has a couple errors right now and I'm going to get them fixed. And then I will add more informational content for people, because I find that seems to be what people want the most. So I do offer growing guides right now, and I want to offer a more general one with more plants in it in the future. So I'm been working on that. And otherwise, I'm a mom with 2 kids, so I'm really busy and I don't have a lot of projects on the go.
I mean, you still got a lot on there, so I think, you still are quite prolific.
Yes, I do write a lot. I want to start having it all on my own website. Now I've
Yeah.
learned, yeah, that's the way a lot of us should go, is to put our best content on our own website and in our own newsletter instead of social media. So I'm going to start focusing more on that.
Mhm. Cool. I also just learned recently that Google has now started indexing Instagram captions.
Oh,
So I actually showed up in a Google search for something like one of my posts, and I was like, interesting. So
well, that'll come
that
in
does
handy.
help.
I've got a lot of folklore and medicinal lore on my Instagram. So, yeah, excellent.
It's finally useful.
Yeah, not just to me. It's so hard to go back and search for things on Instagram feeds though, which is why I want to put it on my website.
Yeah, anything that has a search box on a website is like designed to help you find the information. If it's a search box on a social media platform, probably not so much.
They stopped making hashtags work. They don't work properly anymore.
Mm.
I used to use them to organize information and now you can't.
Thanks, Zuckerberg.
Yeah, they definitely don't want us to be able to find things easily, which is quite annoying. So I'm a very organized person with a library background. So I have been worked like with like a database too, if I can pull it off.
Nice.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, it's been absolutely lovely talking to you after all this time of sort
I
of just, like
know.
chatting to you online and stuff. It's been so nice to have an actual conversation, and I hope that people take away that poisonous plants, treat them with respect, but don't necessarily feel you have to get rid of them completely, because then that would be a lot of also beautiful plants gone from gardens and roadsides and whatnot, which would be a
It would
shame.
take away a lot of the plants in our gardens. Yeah.
I mean, I would have nothing but dandelions, but there we go.
Right? I'd have just roses and some hollyhocks.
That would be really boring.
Yeah, it would.
Well, it's been nice chatting to you.
You too, I see. Thank you so much.
Well, thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoyed that episode. If you did, feel free to leave a review wherever you listen to podcasts, because that helps other people find the show too. It also takes between 4 and 6 hours to research, write, record, and edit these episodes, so if you want to help support my time in doing that, then you can buy me a coffee. Or you can join the Fabulous Folklore family on Patreon and enjoy extra benefits, including exclusive episodes and articles, and even illustrated talks. All the links you need are below, and thanks in advance.